our severe weather that we're expecting to move into Houston tomorrow on Tuesday. This is really going to be a sort of an all-day affair as far as the rain and potential severe weather for the area of Houston. So sort of sun up to sundown is when this is all going to be kind of happening. There'll be a few little pockets of periods of time in which it's definitely more intense and when we're going to have to watch things a little closer. But rain all day is a possibility tomorrow. In a minute, you're going to see the 7-day forecast, and it's not real often that I put 100% chance of rain, just because somebody out there won't see rain in the viewing area, and then you'll want to tell me about how it wasn't 100% chance. But I'm very confident that the Fox 26 viewing area tomorrow is going to see some rain of some kind, and many of us are going to probably get more rain than we want. And some of us are even going to, unfortunately, get some severe weather. And just a reminder, when we use that word severe, it has sort of some specific things that it's in reference to when you're talking about the National Weather Service and that information that they're outputting. Severe weather is usually going to be talking about some damaging winds. It's going to be talking about some large hail, which of course also ends up being damaging. And then tornadoes also going to be something to be concerned with when we use that term severe. So that's a little separate than flooding when you have a flooding threat. So tomorrow we actually have both. We have the severe threat and the flooding threat. If you look at these monitors here behind me, first of all, the one in the very back over here is our Futurecast. I've got that paused at noon tomorrow. So you probably don't have to worry about seeing all the specific detail. You can see the red plastered across the Houston area. That is those intense downpours and also the possibility of some of those stronger storms that would have the damaging wind and hail and maybe even isolated chances for tornadoes, kind of all mixed in there a little bit. So that's certainly sort of the overview for tomorrow that we could be dealing with at any time. So severe storms are definitely going to be possible. Now, overall, the largest threat for the majority of us are going to be these damaging winds. So any of us could see any of these threats, but that damaging wind, those 30 to 40 mile an hour gusts, maybe up at even a chance for a 50 mile an hour gust of wind across the Houston area is something that we're going to be cautious for. And yes, we've talked about the tornado threat and the hail also going to be a possibility. And with that comes some street flooding. That's going to be something that we're a little bit concerned with as well. So I'm going to break this down a little bit for you. And I realize that these images might be just a little hard to read right now on our stream here. Make sure you can tune in at Fox 26 News at 9 and 10. I'll be kind of going over this graphic a little bit more, but we've kind of got those three things broken down a little bit more, what we talked about with the tornado, the hail, and the winds. You'll notice this red, orangish, reddish area with a hash mark here for our southwestern counties. This is going to be where there's a bit of a higher risk for tornado, and that's going to be a higher risk in intensity, meaning a stronger tornado, but also just more of a possibility of seeing a few of them. And that's primarily, again, going to be for Matagorda County and Brazoria County and into portions of Galveston County. That's that tornadic threat. So in general terms, we've been saying that the higher tornadic threat is going to be closer to the coast, is kind of what we've been saying. Hail is also going to be something that we're looking for as a possibility, 1 to 2 inches, maybe even in size. And then we've talked about the winds kind of being one of those widespread areas. So here's the bigger picture. This is the storm system out to the west. It's still kind of getting organized. You can see that rotation in it. The front will get more organized, and it's going to continue to sort of take a direct path straight to us here in the Houston area. So I thought I might just take a pause. And I know that you might be leaving some comments. If you're not leaving comments, here's your opportunity to kind of jump in, leave a comment or a question that you might have. Our top-notch digital staff here helping me with fielding some of these questions. And I'm just going to check with Ronnie. We're doing okay right now. So good. So we might have some folks kind of jumping in here and we'll pause when we need to do that. So We've kind of looked at that and broken it down on those three components. Again, when you see this image where it's showing from the Storm Prediction Center, and I'm going to make sure that we're clear here, this is a 1 out of 5 threat. And sometimes different people use different words on how to rate those threats. We like to say a high possibility that there could be some severe weather, and that's going to be in the southwestern portions of the viewing area. The main reason that we're seeing this 3 out of 5 instead of just the 2 out of 5 is the tornadic possibilities that we've been discussing. And if you'll kind of remember that we've had this pattern for a while where these west coast storms move across to the east, and most of the time this 3 out of 5 threat, or this high risk, it hasn't been in the Houston area. It's been up to our northeast Arkansas, northern portions of Louisiana, over into Mississippi. All those areas have been getting it. We've been missing it because that low hasn't dipped down far enough to the south. But what we just talked about with this low now is going to dip down to the south instead of just making a move straight across to the east. So that's going to be kind of the reason why we're seeing some of that. I'm going to check in with Ronnie once again here if we got a question.
We've got several questions now, JD. Susan from the Heights wants to know, how bad is it going to be up on the north side in Houston tomorrow?
North side of Houston. Now, we've been talking about the south and the southwest as being the higher possibilities of some of those severe threats. So while the north side of Houston is in that 1 out of 5 risk, it's still in the risk area, right? So there is still a possibility. It's just that it'll be more isolated and it won't be as widespread and it won't be as intense as what we're seeing down to the southwest. So all of those things that we've talked about are possible in the north. It's just not quite as favored, and perhaps the intensity might not be as high if something were to happen there as well. Let's do one more question.
Sure. Hector on Facebook wants to know, what time will this event start? Like, when is it expected to start really rolling in and start becoming a problem for everyone?
Yeah, that's a great. And I didn't really address much of that yet, except in the bigger picture, the 9 to 5. I've been talking about that kind of being when everything can happen. So we've got two different systems. We talked about the low pressure system and then that front that moves in behind it. And so those two specific things will spur a little bit of extra energy. So that low will probably be a little earlier in the day. 11 to noon is sort of that window for some of that intensity. And then later in the day, probably 3 to 4, that'll be the next wave of the more intense storms when it comes through with the front. And we'll show you that Futurecast here in just a minute, and you'll be able to sort of timeline that a little bit more. But overall, if I fine tune it a little bit more, I would say, from 10 to 4 is the bigger window when we're kind of need to be, like, if you have any plans to be leaving a safe place, like your home, well, for most of us, between 10 and 4, you need to check and look at that radar, see what kind of alerts are out at the moment and where those intense storms are headed before you leave, because we don't want anyone heading out and running into trouble when you could have just stayed a little bit longer. Let me jump to the Futurecast and show this to you just a little bit. This starts at about 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to run it through to 10:30, I think, and pause it at 10:30. So around 10 to 11, you see how all of a sudden we flared up on the red and the oranges, indicating those more intense storms, and they've started to move to the south a little bit more. And this is that first sort of pulse of energy that we're talking about with that particular low. And it kind of gets a little bit more widespread. I'm going to back it up just a little bit here and show, well, we'll just leave it there for now. I don't want to completely start all over again. But notice how things have gotten a little narrower and there's more of a line. This helps to create that severe weather of the winds and the tornado possibility. So that would be a little bit later today. I've got this paused at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can see that we've actually cleared the downtown area on this particular model at 4 o'clock. Now we're going to give or take a little bit. If it ends up being 5 o'clock before we get here tomorrow, that's just the way, Mother Nature unfolded, and it didn't quite completely match our computer models. But we've got a good idea of how that's going to kind of unfold. And then this is the good news here. Watch how quickly this just is gone. By the time we get to sunset, things clear out quite quickly. We're going to be left with some fantastic weather kind of for the rest of the day. Let's talk about rainfall real quick, and then we'll do some more questions after we talk about rainfall. This is going to be, because remember, we've got the severe threat and then we've got the flooding threat. So this is going to be that flooding issue. We're not going to get too focused on these exact areas of this most intense rainfall, these 4 to 5 inches of rain. Any of this could be moved around by 20 miles or so, and we're not going to say, well, it has to be right here along 288. This could easily kind of move over to the west a little bit more. This gives us a pretty good idea, but the picture I want to show here as far as the flooding threat, we'll show Interstate 10 down through downtown Houston. Most of it is going to be happening south. No, there is some a little bit to the north of it, but for the majority of it, it is going to be south of Interstate 10 where we kind of see some of that more intense weather happening. Okay, I think we're good on that graphic. We don't necessarily need to show that, but basically just that we're definitely looking for stormy weather.
Actually, one person was wanting to know, is it going to start being cold after this latest round of weather?
Yeah, I'll summarize by saying we're going to end January feeling a lot more like January than we started January, and we're gonna look at that 7-day forecast here at the very last thing when we start wrapping things up.
Okay, the last question or the other questions I had is just about kind of the areas like Cypress and different parts of towns like Cypress, Baytown. I know that's all different areas of Houston, but maybe just show that graphic one more time of the areas that are at the higher threat levels for severe weather.
Yeah, so this is going to be the Futurecast, kind of showing those storms that are kind of moving on through here. And I wanted to pause it, and I didn't a minute ago, but I'm going to do it now. This, again, see how it gets a little bit more linear, it gets thinner, it gets more organized. That's that organization for some of that severe component where we're going to get those winds really whipping and pushed out in front of it. If there's that rotation, we're going to see some of that. And, this is going to be about 3:30 in the afternoon is where the model, give or take a little, remember, where we're looking at. But let me get back to the Storm Prediction Center. This is kind of the classic severe outlook that we use. I'm going to even zoom in a little bit more here. And sorry, I don't want to totally leave out the woodlands. You're definitely as a possibility of seeing some of that severe weather, but I'm going to focus on our southern counties just a little bit more to remind everyone that that's where we're looking at this intensity. And I know on this map, these colors kind of blend a little bit more together here. But this is those counties where we're looking at, even the southern portions of Fort Bend County and Wharton County. We're also looking at some of that. I mentioned Brazoria and Matagorda earlier on it. So, let me just do one more round of questions, and then we'll get to that 7-day. That's kind of the good news. We'll end there.
I think the only other main thing is going to be street flooding. Any concerns there? Anything we need to really worry about in that regard?
Totally. So on my map here, I've said 4 to 5 inches. We could definitely have some isolated areas with 6 or more. If you just keep getting hit over and over again, and it is really going to be one of those scenarios where if you live next to some of these areas that are low lying or those roadways that just always collect the water and are going to be a bit of a problem. It's short term for the most part, but it is one of those scenarios, like I mentioned. Like I think I mentioned this in one of our newscasts today. I think for tomorrow, before you head out in the afternoon, if you're going to, head home from work, just check things, see what the status is, because maybe if you just waited an extra 30 minutes, you had a little extra time on the TikTok or something where you just sat for a moment, you might have saved yourself a lot of headache by doing that and just letting this clear just a little bit further on. Okay, let's jump to the 7-day because that's kind of the good news, I think. And people are wanting to see that. The cooler weather is here. How about some mornings in the 30s? Do you like your January in the 30s? Because we've got a couple mornings here. Well, even on Wednesday morning, some of us will be in the 30s. I got a 40 for the morning low on Wednesday, but some rural or northern places will probably hit that 30s of some kind. And then majority of us are going to see those 30s as well. And highs in the 50s are almost 60 degrees. Again, that's some pretty good stuff. So, all right, sir, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Make sure you tune in tonight at 9 and 10 on Fox 26. You can flip the stream on as well. If you're not next to the television, flip the stream on. We'll be doing this once again here. Our whole newscast will be here. Don't forget, if you need an app The Fox 26 weather app is fantastic with our radar. The Fox 26 News app doesn't have the power of the graphics that our weather app provides on the radar, but it does have some other great information with some power outages and some other things along those lines if you don't have that one in there as well. So double up, get both of the apps. If you can only get one, get the weather app. But do what you need to do. Stay connected. Be safe tomorrow.